Hello, beautiful human. Happy Monday. At least it's Monday where I am right now. I'm feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, relatively so. Happy to say 2026 is off to a relatively good start. I hope it's off to a good start for you as well. I am showing up here live at 3:33, my favorite time of the day, mathematically speaking, numerically speaking, to discuss what's on my mind. And today that is how calm is really like the superpower. It is the competitive advantage that trumps all other competitive advantages, because without calm, all the other ones get tossed out, like the proverbial baby with the bathwater. I gotta set these down before I hurt somebody. Yeah, I was just thinking about all the little examples in 2025 and other times of my life where I and others have lost my cool. In fact, it just happened to me earlier today while I was taking my dogs to the park, and we've been working on keeping our cool when we're out and about, and they still have some work to do, and so do I. and I ended up yelling at my dogs because they were barking at someone, and the ridiculousness of it all. Luckily, I was able to recognize quickly, it's very familiar to me, and pull myself back, take a nice deep breath. Remember that a good leader doesn't yell, that doesn't actually solve the problem, and bring myself back into a regulated state fairly quickly. But when that relatively quick, pretty quick after that happened, I was reflecting on how here I am teaching emotional fitness and nervous system regulation, and then still losing my temper sometimes. And I want to bring it up because to want to never lose your temper, to want to never spill over that threshold of overwhelm is probably the wish of a dead person, as I've heard it say. I think life is constantly throwing things our way, and sometimes they're little things like the dogs barking, relatively speaking, and sometimes they're giant things like parents dying or children dying. There's just things beyond our control that are going to happen in a life, in your life and in mine, in all of our lives, that are going to be beyond our control and that are sometimes going to throw us over that threshold of overwhelm. What I have been working on the last 5+ years, and what I'm looking forward to teaching in 2026, is about how to recognize when we're approaching that threshold of overwhelm, hopefully so that we can do things to buffer that zone a little bit before we go spilling over and yelling at our dogs or people in our lives. Or even, for me, a big one is that negative thought process that I will engage in long before I spill over and yell at people out in the world, or at, even online, or at my dogs in my car. None of those my favorite way to be, by the way. But long before that happens, there's something happening in my mind, which is on the path to that spillover. And that is negative thought patterns. It is stress accumulation. So they're related, right? So what I've been working on since at some point the end of last year, and very deliberately as I've entered this year, is just those micro moments of letting go to regain my calm. I like the metaphor of melting like butter melting into toast. So I think of that. I start with the bottoms of my feet. And I just, as soon as I realize that I'm stressing, that I'm thinking some thought, could be any number of thoughts that's creating tension in my body, I just try to evoke that thought of melting like butter and just let that thought go for the moment. It doesn't mean I can't pick it up later. It doesn't mean I'm not going to address whatever I was thinking about. But as soon as I recognize that it's creating tension in my body, if I can let it go and let it melt away like butter, then I regain my calm, my relaxed state, a higher state, which from that state, I'm able to address whatever is going on, whether it's the thing I was just thinking about. Pro tip, it's usually not the thing that I was thinking about, but sometimes it is. And in fact, like a lot of times if there's a repeating thought, which I have a lot of, if I can stop myself from that stressful repetition, which is just wearing my body down, wearing my nervous system down, and keeping me from being able to be the person that I need to be to deal with the situation as my best, the best version of myself. If I recognize that it's a repeating pattern, this is when I sit down and do what's commonly called shadow work. I'm just finishing up my shadow mandala workbook, which I had a lot of fun creating. And in creating it, I put myself through the workbook, as one does. And that really reminded me of how important that reflection time is. I think a lot of us, including myself, spend a lot of time learning. There's so much to learn these days, and that is amazing. It's wonderful. But if we don't spend some time integrating, figuring out how we're going to implement that in our lives, taking some time to extract the actual useful bits and implement those new habits into our lives, then they are unlikely to actually create any meaningful change. And I think we're all very familiar with this New Year's resolution phenomenon. It's kind of become a trope or a meme where it's a whole movement now of refusing to set any New Year's resolutions, partly because we know we fall down, and partly because there's legitimacy to thinking, hey, I'm just going to actually create change throughout the year in my life, that positive change. I don't think there's a right or a wrong to it as far as setting resolutions or not. By the way, I just think I think anything that we get set in a rigid way where we think, oh, this is for sure the way. If you've been a parent, then you know. As soon as you figure out the way changes. The framework changes. The child grows a little older. And in your own life, if you're parenting yourself, as I hope you are to some degree at least, then you're going to find it's very similar. Just about the time you figure yourself out, you're a new person. And just about the time you figure out, the business world or the coaching world or the therapy world, whatever world that you're trying to master, if you should be so talented and lucky as to master some of it, it's bound to change. And that is where a transformation coach like myself comes in handy. And what I teach is really all about riding the waves, as I like to call it, but it's also about up-leveling your skill set so that you can ride those waves with a little more style, grace, and ease, and so that you can learn to tuck and roll when you fall down so that you don't get so battered up, and so that you can get up more quickly. And hopefully, maybe you spring up to the next level. A big part of what I work on is how to take those shadows, those lessons, those what we call failures, and extract the feedback, the value from them, and then use that to up-level our lives, find the gifts hidden in those shadows. And that's a big part of what I did with my Shadow Mandala Workbook, and what I am super looking forward to doing in 2026. I have many, many containers for doing that, and I welcome you to enter any of them that look like the right one for you. I am going to be live streaming more often here on the YouTubes, and you can expect me to show up around 3:33 Mountain Standard Time a lot of days, maybe 1:11 some days, 11:11. Those repeating numbers that make it a little bit extra to show up for are the most likely times that I will show up. That said, I'm not ready to make any promises yet, so that's as close as I'm going to get for now. I am going to sign off now and do a little more formulated and edited podcast on this subject of how calm is really the foundational competitive advantage that is the key to all the other competitive advantages. In a business group that I'm in, we talk a lot about AI and how that is a competitive advantage in every arena, and that's absolutely true. But just like every other competitive advantage, and there are so many, I won't start listing them, but most of us have at least a few that we're probably squandering because of our lack of ability to stay calm, our lack of ability to stay regulated. And as I mentioned at the start with my example of yelling at my dogs, here I am working on my leadership, working on training them, working on being healthy, working on dissipating stress by getting outside and walking with my dogs at the park. And I undo so much of that by losing my cool and yelling in my car. And just those few moments of yelling, I elevate the cortisol in my system. I'm creating actual physical damage to my body right now. Not right now, but then when I'm doing that. And luckily, again, I'm getting more and more able to catch that, to recognize those signs and signals and shift my energy so that I stop that. And then now I'm doing my best to extract the lesson from that so that I can move forward, up leveling myself instead of spiraling downward. So let me know if any of this resonates. Love to hear from you. Let me know where you are. Let me know what you're struggling with. And be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And that way you can see me again soon. Till then, ciao for now.